Hello, and welcome to Just the Dis. We talk about Blu-rays here. My name is Brian, and today we're going to talk about some Mill Creek releases over the past 2-3 months, and I'm going to offer some pairings to go with each of the ones I talk about. And I'm going to start with this one. Alpha Dog from 2006, directed by Nick Cassavetes, who did a great little movie called She's So Lovely in the late 90s. This one is not up to that standard in my mind, but what I will say is that it is intriguing in that it is based on a true story, and the cast is insanely ridiculous. You can see most of them on the cover here. Ben Foster, Emile Hirsch, Sharon Stone, Justin Timberlake, Anton Yelchin, Bruce Willis, Sean Tosi, but there's even more than that. I mean, there's just so many people that show up in this, even as like side characters, that and a lot of them are so young that it's just intriguing to watch from that point of view. But the two main narrative characters are the Emile Hirsch character, Johnny, what the heck's his name? Oh, shoot, I forgot now. True Love. Johnny True Love, maybe? I can't remember. And the Ben Foster character. The Emile Hirsch character is a drug dealer, and his dad is played by Bruce Willis. And he has some friends that sort of hang around his place, Timberlake being one of them, Sean Tosi being one of them. Some of these guys owe him money. Like Tosi seems to be sort of an indentured servant in a way because of some money owed, I think. And I miss Sean Tosi, by the way, an actor that was, much more prominently used in the late 90s through around this time in 2006, but I haven't seen him quite as much. I'm not sure if he's doing TV work at this point, but always a big fan of Outside Providence. Really enjoyed him in that film. Anyway, so the drug dealer is owed money by the Ben Foster character. He attempts to, get the money and is unable to, and then the Emile Hirsch character decides he's going to get violent with the Ben Foster character, and that is perhaps an unwise move in that it creates this vendetta between them, over like, you will give me my money, and him saying, forget it now, and they kind of go to war. And this is, again, based on a true story. The main part of it is that the Ben Foster character has a younger brother played by Anton Yelchin, who is then later kidnapped by Emile Hirsch and his cronies, and that sort of sets off this whole thing. I mean, it's a sad story. It's a very tragic story, and it is intriguing to read the real life details of it. But it doesn't end well. We'll put it that way. And it's a tough watch in some ways, and I'd forgotten what it was like, but all the cast is really good. The young actors, I was trying to think of, like, Amanda Seyfried shows up for a second in a very small part with Amber Heard, I think, also like in a very small part. Like, that's in addition to this incredibly, Olivia Wilde, just a ton of great young actors being used in this film. So it's pretty remarkable in that sense. But yeah, kind of a tough watch, but an interesting California movie. And so for my pairing, this is going to seem a little strange, and it's not on Blu-ray, so I can't use a Blu-ray, but I'm going to go with Less Than Zero. And I think part of it has to do with the California thing. Part of it has to do with young people with too much money and how that ends in sort of a nihilistic tragedy. And this is a good movie, if a downbeat one. And again, a movie that has a really strong young cast. Obviously, Andrew McCarthy, Jamie Gertz, Robert Downey Jr., but then you have, beyond that, some other familiar faces, and it's it's just one of those movies that, again, California, I don't know, there's just something about these young people playing at being adults and getting themselves in trouble, and drugs being a big part of both movies. Something lines up there, and I don't know if it's quite right. But so Less Than Zero would be what I would offer as a pairing for Alpha Dog. Next up, we have Safe House from 2012, I believe. And this is a, espionage thriller, if you will. You have younger Ryan Reynolds playing a guy who works in a CIA safe house. He has been for about 12 months, and he is now trying to break out of that. His boss is played by Brendan Gleeson. The rest of the cast includes Sam Shepard, Vera Farmiga, Ruben Blades, Robert Patrick. So it's a good, strong cast. Anyway, so he's always talking to his superior, played by Brendan Gleeson, about like, hey, get me out of this gig. And when suddenly something arises where there is an operative played by Denzel Washington who is brought to the safe house, and the safe house is immediately breached. So it's clear that there may be some foul play involved in terms of somebody knowing about the safe house and finding it so quickly. Denzel's character has some very sensitive information that some folks in the CIA, or who knows who, seem to want, and definitely don't want that information to get out. So it's got a great sense of paranoia about it, and there's a great sort of, not mentor relationship, but almost, like he is a young, inexperienced agent, if you will, and Denzel Washington's character has a lot of experience and is quite notorious, and so it makes for a good chemistry between the two of them. I just think Denzel is just stunningly good in just about everything I've ever seen him in, and Ryan Reynolds, does well playing off of him. But it's a very dramatic role. Obviously, we're used to a much more comedic Ryan Reynolds at this point, but he's playing it pretty straight here, and so it's a decent little thriller. I don't think I had seen it before, but what immediately came to mind was Enemy of the State. In some ways, there's sort of a flip in that the Will Smith character in this film isn't even an operative at all, and he's sort of tied into some CIA, spy stuff inadvertently. But then he sort of runs into the Gene Hackman character, who is this sort of older, weathered, espionage man. And so I guess I see it that way in terms of like, they both have an older, stalwart, spy character, and they both have a young, inexperienced guy, and there's lots of paranoia and lots of people chasing after them, and you don't know who to trust, and so it's just kind of like one of those movies. So I dig that about it. I'm a fan. So that's Enemy of the State to go with Safe House. Then we have Dave Chappelle's Block Party. This one from 2006, I guess. And this is a neat one. It's mostly a concert movie, but it's sort of a documentary about Dave Chappelle setting up the concert he wants to throw in Brooklyn, and all the people that he wants to be a part of it. So, it's like people like Kanye West, Mos Def, Talib Kweli, Common, the Fugees, Dead Prez, Erykah Badu, Jill Scott, The Roots. So it's this really epic concert that he set up. And so we cut between him setting it up, inviting people to come, which is really fun. Sometimes it's just people from his neighborhood, and things like that. And then seeing the actual performances, which are so dynamic and so excellent. So it's just a really solid, enjoyable concert film and documentary. It's directed by Michel Gondry. It is not exhibiting necessarily some of the style that at least I sort of associate with him. It's a little bit more straightforward in that sense, but it is well put together and, moving, and just a really enjoyable concert movie. So what came to mind for this is another sort of concert movie with Chuck Berry called Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll, which I may have talked about on the channel before. I can't remember. But this one, directed by Taylor Hackford, is a documentary basically about Chuck Berry and him trying to put together this concert. In 1986, Keith Richards invited a roster of brilliant musicians to honor Chuck Berry for an evening of music to commemorate Berry's 60th birthday, including performances by Eric Clapton, Robert Cray, Linda Ronstadt, Etta James, and Julian Lennon, along with an unforgettable duet by Chuck and John Lennon in archival footage. But this is a fascinating documentary, much more of a documentary than a concert film, although there is a decent amount of performances in it as well. But it just gives an incredible portrait of Chuck Berry as a man, as a businessman, like a very shrewd businessman, to be kind. He really is about getting paid, and rightfully so. This is a guy who's been not necessarily treated the best his entire life. He's spent time in prison, and he's obviously had money taken from him, so he is like, pay me up front or I ain't showing up. And there's this whole thing that sort of plays out in the documentary about him wanting to get paid to be in this documentary about him, and just agreeing to do like 2 hours. And then, of course, when you shoot a documentary, you're going to shoot more than 2 hours of footage. You're going to shoot a lot more than that. And so then each day when Chuck returns, it's a renegotiation of like, okay, this is what you need to pay me today to be here. And just fascinating from the point of view of a businessman and a rock and roll icon, and just what a perfectionist he is in some ways in terms of the performing stuff. But I love it, and I just thought of it when I was watching Block Party. Next we have Finding Forrester with Sean Connery. This is from Gus Van Sant, sort of a follow-up / sister film, I guess, to Good Will Hunting. And this one has to do with a young writer played by Rob Brown, I believe. And it is just one of those movies where you have a young man who, in this case, wants to be a writer. It says Jamal Wallace is a talented 16-year-old basketball player in New York City whose secret passion is writing. William Forrester, played by Sean Connery, is a reclusive Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist who never gave the world a second novel. After an accidental meeting, Forrester becomes Jamal's unlikely mentor, providing guidance to help develop the young man's exceptional skills. Soon, Forrester's harsh view of the world begins to change both men, as both men learn lessons from each other about life and the importance of friendship. So a mentor movie, a movie about being a writer, and an inspirational story. And I couldn't think of a better movie off the top of my head than Wonder Boys, which is not inspirational in the same way, although it kind of is. But it is also about an author who had a great, successful first novel and has not offered a second novel, and has some young people around him, played by Tobey Maguire and, of course, Katie Holmes, who are trying to take inspiration from him for their own writing. And just a really fun, offbeat story of a much less, I don't want to say regal, but a much less sort of noteworthy, but noteworthy in terms of being a role model. He's a pot smoker. He is fooling around on his, he's having an affair, and he's generally troubled. Let's put it that way. And so it's a different character, much so to the Connery character in Finding Forrester, but I just thought the writing aspect and the mentorship aspect might make for a fun pairing with that one. Next up we have MacGruber. This, of course, the action spoof, spy spoof, directed by Jorma Taccone of the Lonely Island group. And this is a huge cult classic now, where Will Forte, is playing his Saturday Night Live character, a spin on MacGyver, but much more aggressive and obnoxious and silly, and generally annoying as MacGruber. And he's squaring off against an incredible Val Kilmer in this film, one of my favorite Val Kilmer villain performances, and he is great in this. Both are great, but this one's just a lot of fun. Obviously, you can see it has Kristen Wiig and Ryan Phillippe, and you also have Powers Booth, who I adore, Maya Rudolph briefly. And so it's just one of those very goofy, not Austin Powers like, because it's got a bit more of an edge to it than something like that. This is a bit more graphic in terms of the language, in terms of the violence, and everything's cranked up. And so I know this movie has a great following, and I thought I'd probably pair it with The Other Guys, which is Adam McKay's buddy cop spoof, but which is also sort of an action comedy, which has, I feel, somewhat of a similar ridiculous sensibility to MacGruber. I mean, it's not quite the same tone, but this is a movie that I feel like, got some love when it came out. There's a great supporting performance by Michael Keaton as their commanding officer at the police station. There's an ongoing joke about some music that he likes. I'm not going to spoil the joke, but or that he seems to be quoting, but he doesn't know that he's quoting it. And there's just a lot of great humor between Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg in this movie. So I thought, two action comedies together might be enjoyable. So The Other Guys, and then we have Hellfighters with John Wayne, Catherine Ross, Jim Hutton, and this is actually a kind of favorite of mine in the John Wayne canon. It's the later Wayne. I want to say it's like 68. Yeah. And so he's getting up there in age, and he is part of this like really elite firefighting crew that fights oil fires. And they are, since they're dealing with oil fires, there's obviously a good deal of money to support them and their business. So they are treated to kind of VIP, high level, just status in terms of they have like private jets that fly them around, and they're kind of, not playboys, but like Jim Hutton is very much like he feels like James Bond or something. Like he's hanging out with some lady and he gets the call. They got to go fight some fire. And Catherine Ross, I think, if I remember, plays John Wayne's daughter. And, it just becomes one of those things where it's like a very dangerous job. And that's why they're paid so much to do it. They're protecting oil and, making sure that, a lot of people aren't hurt and that a lot of oil isn't lost in these oil fires, but they're very difficult to fight. They're not like regular fires. So there's lots of, special techniques involved, special equipment. But this one's directed by Andrew V. McLaughlin. Also stars J.C. Flippin and Bruce Cabot and Vera Miles. And I've just been a fan of this one for a long time. It's just this very machismo John Wayne while he's still sort of playing a dad thing. And yeah, it's just one of those like, trying to protect my men and do the best job I can, be a pro kind of movies. But I'm a big fan. I like this one a lot. It is 2.35:1 widescreen, looks great on Blu-ray. And I've got a couple to pair with it. I'm going to go with some John Wayne cop movies from even post Hellfighters. I'll start with Brannigan, which is, he stars as Lieutenant Jim Brannigan, a Chicago policeman sent to the UK to escort a crime boss, played by John Vernon, who I'm a huge fan of, back to the U.S., and it doesn't go easy. We'll put it like that. And it's very much John Wayne doing a Dirty Harry kind of thing. And it's pretty fun. He is very big and larger than life as ever in this performance, and I dig it. And then the other cop movie that you can watch, this one's from 1975, and then prior to that, I believe, in 74 is McCue, which is even grittier. This one's a little bit, this is almost campy in some sense, but this one's a little darker and more straight to the Dirty Harry point. Two slain officers lie in pools of blood on the street. There's no pattern to the killings, and police are confused and scared. Only after gunshots splatter his partner across a back alley, and Detective Lon McCue himself narrowly escapes death after the bloody rampage. Does the bloody rampage start to make sense? McCue knows whom to go after. John Wayne thunderously enforces the law in this high-velocity thriller that's like a big city revenge western on wheels. And this one is directed by John Sturges, who, of course, did The Great Escape and Magnificent Seven. And so both are fun. This one, again, a bit more of a downer, but I thought, do a John Wayne triple. And then lastly, there's this Scars of War 4-movie Vietnam collection. And as you can see, it includes Brian De Palma's Casualties of War, Alan Parker's Birdie, and then Alamo Bay is directed by Louis Malle, which is very cool. And Summer Tree is directed by Anthony Newley. So Casualties of War is, it's sort of ostensibly about a soldier played by Michael J. Fox who finds himself divided against his own squad when they, led by Sean Penn, unnecessarily kidnap a female villager, and things go very dark. And so it's dealing with the actual Vietnam battle and then the aftermath, the courtroom stuff as well. So it's pretty intense. It's one of the more intense De Palma films. And Birdie is just, I don't know, one of those movies that has always gotten right to me, like a big favorite in a way, but a movie that I wouldn't call like joyous necessarily, but it's about two guys played by Nick Cage and Matthew Modine who return home from the Vietnam War, and one becomes mentally unstable and has to come to believe he is a bird, and that is the Modine character. And the other one is Cage, who's just sort of trying to help him through the struggle. But we get to see how they meet each other and how they become friends. And the Vietnam stuff is a much smaller part of the movie itself. As with the other two films, Alamo Bay is Ed Harris plays a Vietnam veteran in danger of losing his livelihood, is pushed to the edge when he sees Vietnamese immigrants moving into the fishing industry in a Texas Bay town. So that's sort of a pot boiler kind of story. He's married to Amy Madigan. She becomes friendly with some of the Vietnamese immigrants, one in particular, and that becomes very problematic and difficult in terms of their relationship. And it's heavy stuff. It's a heavy stuff kind of movie. And Summer Tree is the earliest of the films. Casualties of War is 89, Birdie's 84, Alamo Bay is 85, Summer Tree is 1970, and it stars Michael Douglas, Jack Warden, Brenda Vaccaro, and Barbara Bel Geddes, and it's about Douglas as an aspiring musician who's having an affair with a nurse whose husband is fighting in the Vietnam War, decides to flee to Canada when called up for military service, creating tension with his father, played by Jack Warden. So it's more of a counterculture, I don't want to say hippie movie, but a little bit of that. But I do enjoy the late 60s, early 70s Michael Douglas performances. I think we've all gotten to know him from his 80s and 90s stuff, but I do enjoy seeing him in stuff like this. So in terms of pairing, I couldn't pair all of them, but I do want to throw in a plug for another Mill Creek title, actually. This movie, Heroes, with Henry Winkler, Sally Field, and Harrison Ford. And this might be best with, like, Summer Tree, maybe? This one is from 1977. And it says, Henry Winkler and Sally Field play two off-center characters who find love when they least expect it in the moving comedy Heroes. Winkler is a troubled yet high-spirited Vietnam vet who embarks on a cross-country odyssey to open a worm farm and prove his own self-worth. En route, he befriends Carol, played by Sally Field, who is attempting to sort things out before she marries an old flame. Their laugh and tear-filled adventures include including a high-speed run-in with a footloose army buddy, Harrison Ford, become the life-affirming story of two people who find themselves when they find each other. So it's not as much about the Vietnam, although it is about the aftermath of it. And it's a fun Henry Winkler performance, and I do think he is underappreciated as an actor in general, outside of obviously his most iconic character, which we all know and love. But he's great with Sally Field, and it's nice to see Harrison Ford the same year as Star Wars. And I enjoy actually Harrison Ford's, pre-77, pre-Star Wars acting roles. I think they're all interesting as well. So it's just neat to see him in a dramatic role that is not in any way influenced by Star Wars. So I just thought that might somehow go with maybe Summer Tree or something like that. But that's it for these Mill Creek releases. Hopefully there's some stuff in here for you to check out or enjoy the pairings. But that's all I got. So I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.